My goodness. And that $5.7 billion, here's the issue. Ali mentioned it before.
It's not the price of a wall.
It's not even enough money to pay for the wall.
Not even close.
Even DHS estimates have this thing costing more than, say it,
$40 billion. I mean, I've seen low estimates, 15 to 20. Nobody actually believes they're true. I've seen more realistic estimates that start at about $22 billion. But, you know, you got to deal with labor. You got to deal with upkeep.
40 doesn't include labor.
And, as you mentioned earlier, you need some land that's not actually federal land on which to make this.
Eminent domain. Let's talk about it.
We want to get into this now. Joining us, by the way, is Republican strategist Evan Siegfried, who has followed this very, very closely. Evan, we love reading your stuff on this because you, like us, you like the numbers.
He wrote about it 2 years ago.
He'd been writing about this for a long time, but you recently wrote about one of the big costs for the border wall ambitions. And let me just read from there a little bit. Eminent domain, as Stephanie said. What are the issues tied up in eminent domain?
Well, bottom line is the public actually has to own the land that the wall is going to be built on, except there's a big problem with the border. 1,954-mile U.S.-Mexico border, you have 700 miles already secured for the Secure Fence Act, and that's publicly owned. But on the Texas-Mexico border, which is 1,254 miles, only 100 miles is publicly owned. That leaves 1,154 miles of the border that the United States government needs to own and take away from private landowners.
And how does that work?
Well, the government will go to the private landowners and offer fair market compensation for whatever that land is. Except one problem. The landowner doesn't say, oh, okay, they think it's probably worth more. You could say $2 an acre.
As is often the case in eminent domain.
And
things.
as we saw in the Secure Fence Act, the landowners will actually go to federal court. Right now, there are over 120 federal cases still in federal court dating back 13 years for the Secure Fence Act, which is why the fence is still not 100% built.
The Keystone XL pipeline had this problem.
Say this, walk us through this again, because people definitely don't realize for years they've been trying to complete this fence and haven't been able to for this reason.
The fence isn't continuous. It's Swiss cheese, where you're going to see 100 yards of fence and then 100 yards of empty.
Correct.
So you could literally just walk around it. So the president is saying that all we need to do is this wall and build it so quickly and it'll be done and the problem is solved. No, it won't be. We're talking about at least a decade to maybe even 2 decades of actual construction and litigation against the United States government because landowners don't want to lose their land. It also impacts grazing issues. Think about the wall itself. We're not going to put it directly on the border. It's going to need to go because of logistical and terrain issues 2 to 3 miles north of the border. So we're essentially giving Mexico parts of the United States or creating this no man's land.
And that is ranchers' land in many cases. So these they're used to having whatever it is they've got grazing on that land. So they're going to have to be compensated.
And then with the fence, going back to that, there are several ranchers who said, why don't we try and come to an accommodation with the government? Maybe they could put a gate. Well, one rancher was interviewed by, I believe it was Texas Tribune, who said, every time I want to walk my cattle across that fence, I have to ask the United States government permission to go onto my own land. That is the least conservative thing I've ever heard in my
So it's interesting because a lot of people think, whatever, they'll pay for the land. But when we saw the Keystone XL pipeline, we saw that there were ranchers who did not want to give up their land for whatever reason. They're sensitive to it. Their grandparents were homesteaders. Whatever the reason is, the one thing about America is that eminent domain has been used. This New York City is a perfect example of it. So much of what's built up here was brought in by eminent domain. It is just never an easy legal fight. It's not obvious. And even if the president declares a national emergency, it doesn't eliminate the need to go through the same process.
Correct. And it's also going to cost a heck of a lot more. In July 2018, the Government Accountability Office issued a report saying that because of eminent domain as well as construction overruns, the costs and all the public estimates that are out there, including the most conservative and the most liberal, are absolutely wrong, and it's going to cost well north of them. We're talking about a border wall that would cost over $50 billion, probably closer to $100
So if you owned the land and you knew everything and you might have an estimate of $22 billion, it might be true because you own everything. But we don't know what the cost of purchasing that land is and litigating it. The other point you make is not quick.
No, it's not quick whatsoever. It takes much, much longer. We're going to see 15 years of litigation at least. And I think that the president is fooling himself as well as his base by saying we can get it done so quickly. This will not solve a crisis if there is one in the first place. The government would actually be better served by having strategic barriers, because there are some TSA agents and ICE agents who are saying, yeah, we need to have some barriers at specific areas to address specific problems. But we need to have a technological wall, more training for people, ICE agents as well, and Customs and Border Protection. They can actually go out and fix the border themselves, but if they got the proper funding. The president is focused on the wall because it was an easy mnemonic device for him to remember to talk about immigration.
Thank you, Sam Nunberg. He's the one who came up with it.
Unbelievable. Evan, good to see you as always. Thank you.
Thank you.
People should read Evan's stuff because he really understands this wall well.
He does.